and serve as the Vice Chair of the Judiciary Committee. We'll start off by having members of the committee introduce themselves, starting on my right with Senator Ibach.
Good morning, I'm Teresa Ibach, represent District 44, which is 8 counties in southwest Nebraska.
My name is Megan Kilty, I'm legal counsel. Angelina Pierce-Lewis, committee clerk.
Rick Holcroft, District 36, West and South Sarpy County.
Barry Kay, District 40, represent Holt, Knox, Cedar, Antelope, northern part of Pierce, and most of Dixon County.
You will see other senators join us who may be in other committees right now introducing other legislation or have other obligations of that sort. That doesn't reflect how they feel about the bill, but simply they have these other obligations. So also assisting our committee today is our page, Luke McDermott from Omaha, who is studying political science and economics at UNL, and Morgan Baird from Daring, who is a political science major at UNL. This morning we'll be hearing one bill, and therefore we will take it up in order listed, which is the one bill. On the tables in the side of the room, you'll find blue testifier sheets. If you're planning to testify today, please fill out one and hand it to the pages when you come up. This will help us keep an accurate record of the hearing. If you do not wish to testify but would like to record your presence in the hearing, please fill out the gold sheet on the side of the room. Also, I would note the legislature's policy that all letters for the record must be received by the committee by noon the day prior to the hearing. Any handouts submitted by testifiers will also be included as part of the record as exhibits. We would ask if you have any handouts that you please bring 10 copies and give them to the pages. If you need additional copies, the pages will be able to help you provide them. Testimony for the bill will begin with the introducer's opening statement, and after the opening statement, we will hear from any supporters of the bill, then from those in opposition, followed by those speaking in a neutral capacity. The introducer of the bill will then be given the opportunity to make closing statements if they wish to do so. We ask that you begin your testimony. Please begin your testimony by giving us your first and last name and spelling it for the record. If not, I'm going to have to stop you and ask you to spell it. It's really awkward for me, so really for me, please just spell your name for the record. We will be using a 3-minute light system today. When you begin your testimony, the light on the table will turn green. The yellow light is your 1-minute warning, and when the red light comes on, we'll ask you to wrap up your final thoughts. I'd also like to remind everyone at this time, including the senators, to please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. With that, we'll begin today's hearing on LB 588. Welcome to the Judiciary Committee, Senator Wishart.
Thank you, Vice Chair DeBoer and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Anna Wishart, Anna Wishart, and I represent the 27th Legislative District in West Lincoln and southwestern Lancaster County. I'm here today to introduce LB 588, a bill that would establish the Medical Cannabis Act and provide for the cultivation, processing, and use of cannabis for medical purposes in Nebraska. About 6 years ago, my life was completely changed. I was knocking doors and came upon a woman who's a physician in Lincoln. And she spoke to me about her grandson who had debilitating epilepsy and had to move to a state outside of Nebraska to seek treatment with medical cannabis in a doctor. And that physician said that were it not for medical cannabis, they were looking at brain surgery for their 8-year-old grandson. Well, they moved states, and he ended his seizures, and he became a happy and healthy little boy to this day. And I asked her, does your daughter and her family want to move back to Nebraska? And she said, absolutely. But here we would be treated like criminals. And so I remember going home that day and talking to my husband. He was a police officer at the time, and I said, I think I'm going to bring a bill on this. I know Senator Tommy Garrett did it 2 years before. Am I completely nuts in doing this? And he said, Anna, we hardly deal with issues when it comes to marijuana. We deal with alcohol, we deal with meth. But if this is going to help people's lives, this is something you need to do because you made a commitment to your district. So fast forward 7 years, and I sit before you, and a lot of the people behind me sit before you, having worked on this a lot longer than I have. We are multiple pieces of legislation under our belts, 2 ballot initiatives under our belts as well. And I sit before you with a piece of legislation that would be one of the most conservative medical cannabis laws in the country. Just this past year, our group completed our 2nd ballot initiative. And if I go back in time, these are 2 initiatives that we've worked on. The first, we collected over 190,000 signatures during a global pandemic. We had 1,000 volunteers, and personally, I drove across the state collecting signatures. This last ballot initiative, we collected over 180,000 signatures with 1/10 of the amount of funding that we received the last time. Both initiatives were kicked off based on legal challenges, unfortunately. But what I can say is that we had enough Nebraskans who signed these petitions to show that this is an issue that the entire state cares about. I've spent the past 6 years going across the state, meeting with people from all different counties, and you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who wouldn't benefit or know somebody who benefits from having access to medical cannabis. My research into the benefits are not just anecdotal. There is plenty of research that shows the benefits of medical cannabis. In 2017, the National Academies of Science released a landmark report that reviewed over 10,000 academic studies on the effects of cannabis. It found conclusive and substantial evidence that cannabis is effective for the treatment of chronic pain, nausea and vomiting, MS, improving sleep, reducing anxiety, PTSD, and traumatic brain injury. Most recently, research indicates evidence that medical cannabis is helpful in the treatment of epileptic seizures and autism. And we have experts who are following me who will be able to talk to this. And it shouldn't be surprising that there are medical benefits. Cannabis is over 10,000 years old. It's one of the oldest plants ever cultivated by human beings, and it's been used medically across the world for generations. In fact, it was used medically in the United States until the 1930s, and when Prohibition started, and Prohibition, it wasn't on the federal level, it was state by state. When Prohibition started, the National Medical Association at the time came out in opposition because it was a tool that they used to treat conditions. Over the 10,000 years that cannabis has been in humans' lives and cultivated, there has not been one case of a person fatally overdosing. And don't take my word for it. The Federal Drug Enforcement Agency confirms, I quote, "No deaths from overdose of marijuana have ever been reported." Compared to many prescription drugs, including opioid pain medication, which is now one of the leading causes of death in the United States, medical cannabis is far safer and far less addictive. Yet here we find ourselves today with an FDA that can expedite a COVID vaccine, but cannot take action on this plant-based medicine, even though all but 3 states, including Nebraska, have legalized some form of medical cannabis. Most of these states have legalized medical cannabis by ballot from the voices of the people because elected leaders have failed to take action. And not one state that has moved forward on cannabis legalization has reversed their decision. So that brings me before you today. I'm asking for Nebraska's leaders to step up and pass a very safe, very regulated medical cannabis system in our state. I'm not going to go deep into the details of the bill, but I do have a summary that I would like to pass out to the committee. This bill does contain some changes from the previous legislation I introduced 2 years ago. Those, like Vice Chair DeBoer, will be very familiar with this legislation, though, because it includes the Judiciary Committee amendment, which specifically lists the qualifying medical conditions. This list of medical conditions is the result of countless hours of work that I did with the Nebraska Medical Association and paying expert doctors to sit down and walk through. And every single condition that you see in this legislation that is allowed, the NMA has said, yes, there is enough evidence to show that cannabis can provide some medical benefit, that they felt comfortable with that condition being on this list. Secondly, this bill also includes a compromise that I worked on with Senator Ben Hansen when this bill was on the floor of the legislature. It removes vaporization, so you are not allowed to smoke or vaporize cannabis in this legislation. It allows for inhalers, and then it also would put the medical cannabis system under the prescription drug monitoring program to better be able to utilize the benefits of that program in making sure that we are tracking who is utilizing the cannabis and making sure it's an effective program. And I also want to thank Chairman Hansen of the Health and Human Services Committee for co-sponsoring this legislation. If the committee is concerned that something is missing, I have shown over the years that I am willing to further narrow this bill as long as it remains patient-centered. My goal is that no family has to flee our state to get access to medical cannabis for themselves or a loved one. No human being should have to make a decision, no mom or dad should have to make a decision, do I have to get brain surgery for my child, or can I try a plant-based medicine that has been effective in other states for people with similar conditions? This bill is not going to fail because of lack of compromise or thoughtfulness on the part of all of the senators and the stakeholders that have worked on this. If this bill fails, it will fail like it has in the past because of political pressure from a few people in our state who wield their power to stamp out the will of the people. And here's the thing. I know for a fact that the people in this room and the thousands of people who have signed the petitions are not going to be silenced. We will go back to the ballot if we fail to pass legislation this year, no doubt. And the thing is, we've learned now how to run a ballot initiative on 1/10 of the cost of a ballot initiative. And so we know that we'll be able to get this done. We've done it through a pandemic, we've done it with no money, and now we have time. And so I'm hoping that this legislature will think about the opportunity to pass a very, very safe, very conservative controlled system in the state to benefit the patients and Nebraskans. And thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Wishart. Are there questions for Senator Wishart? Senator McKinney?
Thank you, Senator Ford. Thank you, Senator Wishart. Just a couple questions, and thank you again for bringing that up. When it says individuals cannot consume cannabis in the vehicle, even as a passenger, what does that mean?
It means that there will be no consumption, like you could not be utilizing cannabis while you're in a vehicle, so you would have to pull over and manage your prescription there.
So, what if I take a gummy and go on a trip? Would that be a violation?
No, that would not be a violation. It's similar to our alcohol laws where you're not allowed to have an open container.
And then my other question on the license and regulation of producers or dispensaries, is there an equity component to that?
There isn't. Well, I am absolutely happy to work with you on that portion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Other questions? Senator DeKay?
Thank you, Senator DeBoer, Senator Wishart. You mentioned in your presentation, your opening, about not being FDA approved. Where are we at in trying to get medical cannabis FDA approved at that level? And what's the difference between medical marijuana now as a plant-based, as a synthetic cannabis, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Epidiolex?
Yes.
What's the difference between those two?
Yep. So we do have a doctor who's following me who can give you much more details on that. But to answer your first question, the FDA system around this issue is absolutely broken. So there have been studies that have been completed on the effectiveness of cannabis that have been put before the FDA only to be stopped by the DEA from being able to move forward on that. And then this loop happens over and over again. It's absolutely a broken system, and so what's happened is states have just moved forward utilizing the 10th Amendment, our rights, states' rights, have moved forward themselves in terms of creating a system. And I will say that in terms of the federal government, they have clearly over the years, under both Republican and Democratic administrations, not put any money towards enforcing or removing the rights of states to have medical cannabis systems in their state. In terms of Epidiolex, when you look at a whole plant of cannabis, it has a multitude of cannabinoids. You've probably heard of THC is one of them. But there are hundreds, and we're just starting to study, and some of actually the research that's coming out of Israel is some of the most cutting edge on just the benefits of multiple different cannabinoids on our endocannabinoid system, which is our internal system that regulates pain and mood. And so Epidiolex is one synthetic form, but we're finding that people benefit from having access to the whole plant. And this is a plant that's evolved with us for 10,000 years. And so what we're finding is that for certain types of medical conditions, having access to that whole plant and working with farmers and working with doctors to find the right type of plant that supports somebody's medical condition is really what we're looking for.
So with that, is that more of a, I don't want to say broad spectrum drug, but is that more of a broad spectrum deal that will help alleviate the symptoms with the 16 that are proposed here? Or will that be more beneficial to one specific ailment that a patient might have?
All of the conditions that are listed are conditions for which access to the cannabis plant has shown evidence of having benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Decay. Other questions for Senator Wishart? Thank you, Senator Wishart. Will you be here to close?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. We're going